When analyzing specific characters, unless I directly reference something else, I am effectively judging the sources in which a specific character appears in a vacuum. Accordingly, I am willing to ignore larger continuity snarls as long as the sources relating to the character in question remain consistent with one another. In the case of Asajj Ventress and General Grievous, the radical differences in their portrayals between the classic expanded universe and Star Wars The Clone Wars make the two sources completely incompatible. In the case of Plo Koon, his appearances in TCW and its tie-ins not only remain generally consistent with the EU at large, but are in fact beneficial, helping to flesh out his character and his capabilities. The reason for this was because Koon is the favorite character of showrunner Dave Filoni, so effort was put into doing him right, for a change. Though I do find myself wondering, if Plo Koon is Filoni's favorite character, where's the Force lightning? Am I cherry-picking? Yes. Yes, I am. My analyses of Plo Koon will pull from the following sources: his appearances in all three entries of the Star Wars prequel trilogy and their tie-in visual dictionaries, the following issues and arcs from the Star Wars Republic comic series: Jedi Council Active War, Emissaries to Malastare, the Stark Hyperspace War, and Dreadnoughts of Rendili, the Power of the Jedi Sourcebook, the following episodes from Star Wars The Clone Wars: the Season 1 Malevolence Trilogy, Season 2's Lethal Trackdown, Season 3's Padawan Lost, and Season 4's Nomad Droids. Basically the episodes that actually depict Plo Koon in combat. The Clone Wars comic arcs In Service to the Republic and The Sith Hunters, the Clone Wars Campaign Guide, the Clone Wars Adventures MMO minigame Lightsaber Duels, and background details from the following novels: Darth Maul Shadowhunter, The Force Unleashed, and Fate of the Jedi Outcast. My analyses of Sora Bulq will draw from his appearances in the Star Wars Republic comic series, specifically the Trackdown and Siege of Seleucami arcs, the one-shots Jedi Mace Windu and Jedi Count Dooku, and his now defunct databank entry on StarWars.com. My analyses for both will pull from the New Essential Guide to Alien Species, the New Essential Guide to Chronology, and the Essential Guide to the Force. So with all of that out of the way, allow me to present Plo Koon vs. Sora Bulq, the Fanatical Taskmasters. Let's begin. Plo Koon was an elderly kel'dor male, native to his species' homeworld of Doran. A typical specimen, he wore an anti-ox breather and goggles to protect his eyes and sensory organs when away from the helium atmosphere of Doran. However, Koon's anatomy and equipment allowed him to survive and function unprotected in the vacuum of space, albeit only for a brief time. A lifelong practitioner of the Jedi arts, Koon was extremely fit despite his age, boasting a slim, muscular physique. Otherwise, he wore standard Jedi robes. Plo Koon's greatest asset was his stalwart strength, leveraged through hard shunts and binds when lightsaber dueling, and physical throws and grapples when unarmed, even using his anti-ox mask to enable devastating headbutts. Though he favored grounded postures, even assuming a stationary defensive position when fighting in zero gravity, Koon was exceptionally agile when necessary, covering ground with acrobatics and running charges. His refined dexterity enabled his emphasis on energy conservation, executing precise, minimal movements calculated to provide maximum return for minimal effort. Strength came easily to him. Plo Koon's discipline and composure under fire likely owed itself, at least in part, to his cross-training with the Barrandov sages of Doran, whose training techniques centered around sensory deprivation and sensory overload to develop mental fortitude and focus. To a certain extent, this mitigated the physical fragility imposed upon him by his age, allowing him to focus through pain and injury. On Korm, he not only endured a broken arm for the latter half of the mission, he also successfully contended with Asajj Ventress despite being short a hand, even shrugging off a kick to the broken arm. Against Savage Opress, Koon endured a kick to the head, and continued to leverage his dexterity to circumvent the brute's strength, and was only subdued when Opress managed to distract him and rip off his Antiox mask. There is no question that Plo Koon's age had reduced him to glass, but the only way to take him down was to shatter him completely. Sora Bulq was a middle-aged Weequay male native to Rule, the moon above the Weequay homeworld of Sreeler. Say that 5 times fast. Though something of a cultural outcast, Bulq was a typical specimen physically, possessing a dense skeletal structure and tough leathery skin adapted to the harsh desert winds of Sreeler. Though his exact physical dimensions are obscured by his full-length Jedi robes, Bulq was extremely fit, befitting a lifelong Jedi martial artist. The attribute that Sora Bulq relied on most heavily was agility, using acrobatics and dynamic lunges to fling himself at opponents and evade attacks. This constant maneuvering reinforced his strength-based techniques by allowing him to put his full weight behind his blows, and his dexterous styles by combining his elaborate lightsaber katas with broader, full-bodied motions. However, Bulq was a pure swordsman, and has never been observed employing hand-to-hand combat in any capacity. Sora Bulq was typically composed, but the wild abandon with which he embraced the dark side left him emotionally unstable, prone to sadism and bloodlust. Thanks to their robust anatomy, Weequay were noted for their resilience against blunt trauma and burns, and I believe that Sora Bulq's reckless conduct was due, in part, to his willingness to lean on his natural resistances, assuming that he could soak up anything short of a catastrophic hit. Ironically, the only hits Bulq took were catastrophic hits. Against Count Dooku on Bakura, he was disabled by a blast of Force Lightning. Against Mace Windu on Rule, Bulq was force-slammed against a stone wall hard enough to shatter it, overcoming his resistance and rendering him unconscious. Against Quinlan Vos on Saleucami, he simply overextended, allowing the Kifu Jedi to strike his shoulder and carve into his chest, a conclusive death blow. But however ill-advised Sora Bulq's reckless conduct may have been, he was still a highly trained close combat specialist and a biological tank. By all indications, Sora Bulq is undoubtedly younger than Plo Koon and possesses none of the biological limitations of kel'dor. Though Bulq wasn't capable of surviving vacuum exposure as Koon was, his robust Weequay anatomy provided a proven advantage in close combat. That being said, Master Koon was no pushover, his energy-efficient technique fully leveraging all of his attributes while mitigating the infirmities of age. I would credit Koon with a strength advantage and Bulq with superior agility, but their dexterity is comparable. Though Koon has capitalized on his Antiox mask as a bludgeon in close combat, it is a proven weakness that has led to his defeat. Otherwise, both wore standard Jedi robes, differently cut but otherwise nondescript. By his own admission, Plo Koon had grown fragile with age, whereas Weequay are biological tanks. However, Koon was substantially more disciplined, focusing through pain and fighting through injury, where Bulq channeled his emotions while leaning on his natural resistances. How much these resistances are worth in the face of Koon's electric judgment is questionable, especially given Bulq's recklessness. But ultimately, there is no question that it takes much more to shatter Sora Bulq than it does Plo Koon, and the Weequay doesn't have to contend with any of the kel'dor's weaknesses. Advantage to Sora Bulq. Plo Koon was armed with a standard lightsaber, distinguished by the conical radiator segment built into the pommel, a design feature popularized by the Jedi hero Lacanis Subartuk. For the bulk of his career, the weapon projected a golden plasma blade, though by the time of the Clone Wars he had swapped out for a conventional Ilum blue. Following the way of the Krayt Dragon, Koon's combined mastery of both Form 5 variants, Xi'an and Jem-So, left him well prepared for both general combat and lightsaber duels. His skill set was further fleshed out by supplementary training in the aggression form Ataru. Plo Koon's personal technique was built around direct, efficient movements executed with total control and commitment for maximum power, favoring timing and precision over raw speed. His core physical component consisted of stalwart footwork and stances, occasionally using acrobatics and running charges to cover ground. Koon's blade work pulled from the entirety of Form 5 technique, reconfiguring his style by swapping elements. His defensive component alternated between the deft deflections of Xi'an and Jem-So's hard shunts and binds, while his offensive component mixed quick cuts with cleaving slashes. Koon's conservative yet proactive use of telekinetic integration enabled his tactic of using active defense to subvert opponents, setting up for counters, a positive representation of the Form 5 maxim, peace through superior firepower. Plo Koon's battlefield conduct was conservative yet assertive, advancing as a one-man shield wall. He simultaneously played it safe while remaining aware that the best defense was often a good offense, aiming for speedy conflict resolutions. Though entirely capable of weathering the assault, his preference was to interrupt it, as he demonstrated against Asajj Ventress on Khorne. When they tussled within the CIS base, Koon was handicapped by a broken arm, yet he still managed to seize control of the fight, successfully disarming Ventress of her extra lightsaber and forcing her to break off by targeting her remote detonator with telekinesis. But on the other hand, though Koon's hardiness and focus made intimidation tactics effectively useless, his initial bout with Ventress and his confrontation with Savage Opress demonstrated that he could be blindsided or distracted. Ventress ended their first engagement by triggering an avalanche with telekinesis, which led to Koon's aforementioned broken arm. Against Opress, Koon demonstrated his advantage as a duelist by landing multiple superficial lightsaber hits, but Opress managed to distract Koon by killing one of his clone troopers, and used the opening to tear off his breather mask. However, these oversights were the exception to the rule, as Koon typically maintained total control over the situation through his powerful technique and a well-laid plan. Sora Bulq wielded the traditional weapon set of a Jarkai Master, a standard lightsaber supplemented with an offhand Shoto. Both were originally fitted with blue Ilum crystals, but Bulq replaced them with scarlet synth crystals after being ousted as a Dark Jedi. A renowned lightsaber instructor and technical innovator, Bulq was directly involved in the development and refinement of various alternative fighting forms, most notably Vapad. Mace Windu considered Bulq's technical grasp of Vapad to be only slightly below his own, but he attributed Bulq's fall to his failure to master the force-focused discipline of the Form 7 variant. Sora Bulq's personal technique and moveset was dynamic and aggressive, using agile footwork and acrobatics to fling himself at opponents and evade attacks. Though he favored direct hack-and-slash blade work, his extensive multi-form proficiencies provided a high level of technical depth and variation, most visibly expressed through his interchangeable use of single and dual blades. His Jarkai technique was dexterity-based, using the Shoto for close defense, while attacking primarily with his full-length blade. His single saber technique was strength-based, driving opponents with rapid-fire power blows and executing tight blocks when necessary. He supplemented this sophisticated yet brutal style with expert telekinetic integration, setting up for attacks by hurling opponents off balance. The best demonstration of Sora Bulq's strategic planning ability was the assassination of Ventress, which he achieved by using a strike force of Unzadi Master Assassins to divert the old Master's attention while Bulq simply walked up behind him and stabbed him through the heart. However, this degree of cunning was the exception to the rule. Whenever Sora Bulq's plans were derailed or he was dropped into a situation cold, his knee-jerk response was violence. When Bulq flung himself at Windu on Rule, the Corran Master concluded that outfencing him was more trouble than it was worth, instead ending the fight with telekinesis. Though Count Dooku successfully disarmed Bulq of his Shoto on Bakura, he similarly chose to end the fight with his Force abilities, blasting Bulq with lightning. Though Sora Bulq proved an insurmountable opponent for Thulm on Saleucami, his inability to prevent Thulm's escape, combined with Thulm's subsequent campaign of sabotage, left Bulq with an axe to grind. He initially satisfied himself by sadistically toying with Thulm in their rematch, but this rage found a new outlet when Quinlan Vos intervened. Bulq initially dominated him with his Berserker offense, but overextended in the process, an oversight that Vos exploited the moment he regained his composure. However, for all his failings, Sora Bulq's threat level is not to be understated. The combination of advanced lightsaber skill and intense Dark Force channeling making him a formidable offensive heavyweight, and he could be exceptionally cunning when he put his mind to it. Though Plo Koon has demonstrated that he is perfectly capable of dealing with Jar Kai, the advantages offered by Sora Bulq's weapon set are unquestionable, especially given how fully he leveraged them, even using the Shoto as a throwaway weapon when necessary. Despite their opposing skill configurations, both managed to construct fighting styles that effectively balanced versatility without compromising their focus. Koon's total mastery of Form 5 and supplementary training in Ataru provided a balanced array of techniques that could be adapted to almost any situation, where Bulq's specialization in Form 7 served as a funnel for his extensive martial arts proficiencies. However, due to his failure to master the disciplines of Vapad, Bulq's application was effectively a regression back to Juyo, with all of the baggage that entailed. Though Sora Bulq's heavier use of acrobatics made him more visibly mobile, Koon was perfectly capable of keeping pace when necessary, and without overextending the way Bulq has. Furthermore, Koon is prepared for both of the major components of Bulq's fighting style, having effectively dealt with Asajj Ventress's Jar Kai technique with one arm almost literally tied behind his back, and proved his ability to contend with strength-based techniques by holding his ground against Savage Opress's Bulldozer Assault. Despite Bulq's broader skill set and greater technical depth, he never deviated from direct offense, varying only in intensity and putting only a token effort into defense. Koon's narrower array of techniques covered his bases much more effectively, while allowing him to match the dramatic variation between Bulq's different styles with subtle variations in angle and timing. To be perfectly frank, if Plo Koon and Sora Bulq were pitted against one another within the context of the Clone Wars, Bulq would undoubtedly treat Koon as he did Ventress, playing it safe and assassinating him. But in a direct confrontation, Bulq would likely approach Koon the same as he did Mace Windu, engaging directly but keeping something in reserve. However, given Bulq's history of allowing mounting frustration to undercut his tactical awareness, Koon's stalwart defensive stance is a good response against Bulq's aggression. In other situations, Koon's conservative approach has sometimes translated into playing it too safe, but here it's the perfect foil for Bulq's recklessness and instability. Advantage to Plo Koon. Coming from a long line of prominent kel'dor Jedi, Plo Koon was apprenticed under the Wookiee Council Master Tyvoka, and is confirmed to have trained as a Jedi Guardian. Koon was further distinguished by his cross-training with the Barandos sages of Doran, whose training emphasized precognition and telepathy, capitalizing on the inborn capabilities of the kel'dor species. One of their specific techniques was Anya Seth, which guarded against mental intrusion by scrambling the user's brain patterns. As with other techniques within the Hasad-dur family, this was achieved by exerting direct force control over one's own nervous system, a process that naturally suffused the body with electromagnetic energy. My belief is that this discipline fostered Koon's latent talent with Force Lightning, which he refined into his most notable ability, Electric Judgment. As far as conventional Jedi powers went, Koon's application of physical enhancement and Force channeling emphasized strength and reflex, and he made extensive use of Force Heal to treat wounded combatants during the Stark Hyperspace War. Within this same time frame, he also capitalized on his Force bond with his niece to enable a telepathic conference with the Jedi Council from halfway across the galaxy. Additionally, he mastered mind tricks, Force empathy, and battle mind. With telekinesis, Plo Koon's lifting strength was several tons, while his kinetic output was sufficient to hurl a Droch-class pod hunter through space and trigger a cave-in on Troikan. He demonstrated an ability to penetrate telekinetic barriers when he repelled Asajj Ventress with a force push on Korm, and when he deprived her of her detonator remote. Koon's own barrier was never tested, as Ventress instead chose to bury him in an avalanche rather than attack him directly. He furthermore employed lightsaber throws to attack from a distance, precisely targeting enemy weapons and prosthetics. Expertly integrating telekinetic strikes into lightsaber combat, Koon wielded his powers conservatively but proactively, capitalizing on circumstantial factors to enable clever counterattacks, blurring the line between offense and defense. When he originally trained as a Jedi Initiate, Sora Bulq was noted by Yoda for his strength in the Force and his internal balance, a balance that would be upset by his fall to the dark side. Coming into his own as a reigning swordmaster and lightsaber instructor, Bulq no doubt trained as a Jedi Guardian, and accordingly lightsaber combat was his primary recourse. Due to his failure to properly master Vapad, Bulq was unable to create the compartmentalized superconducting loop of dark power that enabled Mace Windu's style, instead functioning as a traditional Juyo stylist and driving himself with dark rage. The wild abandon with which he embraced the dark side provided a level of combat performance sufficient to contend evenly with Windu, but it undercut him both tactically and defensively. Sora Bulq's use of sense abilities is generally defined not by his capabilities but by his inadequacies. Though he caught a whiff of Aayla Secura's Force signature on Anzat, he failed to ascertain her presence or location, though his unforgiving timetable forced him to abort the search. Though he managed to detect Thulm first time out on Seleucami, he was unable to prevent his escape, and failed to detect him thereafter. His successful assassination of Oppo Rancisis demonstrated some ability with Force concealment, though his reliance on a team of Anzadi Master Assassins to divert Rancisis' attention suggests a certain lack of confidence in this power. Sora Bulq's primary offensive heavy hitter was telekinesis, expertly integrated into lightsaber combat to blindside opponents. He demonstrated his power when he successfully penetrated Mace Windu's telekinetic barrier with a Force push, as well as casually thrashing Quinlan Vos on Seleucami, and used a precision lightsaber throw to trigger a laser gate security door. Though Windu's successful push against Bulq could easily be chalked up to Windu's overwhelming force power, it is consistent with the weak force defense typically suffered by Juyo stylists. Overall, Sora Bulq's basic toolset was surprisingly versatile despite his limitations, and he could function as effective tactical support when he bothered to strategize, but he typically allowed aggressive instinct to guide him, wielding his powers as blunt instruments. Plo Koon and Sora Bulq represent an intriguing reversal, in that Koon's non-standard training background ultimately made him a better Jedi, where Bulq's strict adherence to tradition allowed him to conceal his fall to darkness. Both combatants demonstrated a heavy martial focus, but where Bulq clearly allowed this emphasis to come at the expense of his development as a Force wielder, Koon did not. Bulq's heavy use of Dark Rage likely provided a higher physical performance level, but Koon's more moderate approach allowed him to make fuller use of his abilities. Electric Judgment is a notable advantage, given Bulq's demonstrated weakness against Force Lightning, while Force Heal allowed Koon to mitigate injuries, partially compensating for his physical fragility. In a purely holistic sense, Koon was the superior telepath, but this advantage amounts to little, as neither possess any invasive telepathic abilities. Telekinesis, on the other hand, is a major factor. I would rate their kinetic output and overall power as comparable, but where Sora Bulq is elemental and basic, Koon is precise and controlled. Each could thrash the other, but Koon can manipulate situations to his advantage in a way Bulq simply can't. Koon's ability to alter the environment and weather patterns further demonstrates this, though this particular power is unlikely to come up. But be that as it may, advantage to Plo Koon. Beyond their reputation as Jedi sword masters, Plo Koon and Sora Bulq had little in common, especially after Bulq's fall. As a weak way, Bulq is more physically robust, and I don't think it's much of a stretch to say that he is the more developed lightsaber duelist. However, Koon is much more tactically viable, each additional technique in his arsenal providing another layer of functionality, whereas Bulq's purely offensive approach reduced all of his techniques to just another way to swing a lightsaber. Furthermore, though Bulq employed his narrow array of abilities quite intelligently, it's obvious that he allowed his emphasis on lightsaber combat to come at the expense of his development as a Force wielder. Koon did not make the same oversight, his broader skill set providing another tactical implement. To be fair, Sora Bulq's resilient physiology and focused offensive fighting style makes him a serious threat to Plo Koon, and if the old master isn't careful, he could go the way of Count Dooku, a more experienced, versatile, and strategically viable combatant overpowered by a more physically able challenger. However, Koon's skill set and tactics are ideally suited to exploiting the weaknesses brought on by Bulq's direct aggression and emotional instability, stalwart defense and counter being the perfect foil for berserker offense. Bulq and Koon would initially stand evenly matched, but Bulq's mounting rage would undercut his awareness even as it amplified his performance, and he would make a fatal oversight. I declare Plo Koon the victor.